the University of Amsterdam. In Indonesia, it basically means the ability to move up without corruption and nepotism, right? In contrast to certain nepo babies, to use it, that has been popularized in recent protests across Asia, not just in Indonesia. So, among others, Anis founded activism, Action Together, and that is a civic movement connecting volunteers and donors to build bridges in remote areas. And then we'll open the floor for questions from the audience. With the assistance of two of our PhD students, Kuliah and the mic. Because we don't have much time, I want to ask the audience beforehand to stay on topic with the questions. I'm sure there's a lot you want to know about Anis, but we have a certain topic to discuss today. And because the lecture is centered around youth, I particularly want to encourage all the younger members in the audience also to ask more questions. Now, with that, without further ado, Anis, I give you the floor. Hands up for the Anis.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Yatun Sastra Mijaya, for the very kind introduction, and also Professor Ward, Baron Scott, for both of you for organizing this lecture, and also for everyone who it's a working day. Some of you, I heard, take a few hours off just to be able to attend this session. I really appreciate that. This is actually my first time to be at University of Amsterdam. Been to Amsterdam, but never to university. This is first time, and I'm grateful. I'm honored with the opportunity, and thank you for making it happen. Bu Vera, Sandy, for connecting us with our colleague here at the university. The issue reinventing democracy, and I'm trying to put my academic hat here, because I was participating in democratic process a few months ago. Well, almost a year by now. And we have been facing with a few challenges. But let me share some of my thought about democracy, youth, power, and integrity. And this is a reflection. As a reflection, then allow me to go through some of my thought on those subjects. Let me start with the tensions that in Indonesia today, we have a whole generations that has lived only under democracy, the youth. They grew up with elections. They grew up with social media debates, protests, and freedom of speech as something that is normal because they grew up with it. At the same time, this is why it's a tension. On the one hand, you have this generation. On the other hand, the quality of our democracy has been quietly eroding for almost a decade. Things like independence of institutions, anti-corruption works, civic space. Scholars call it as democratic backsliding. So you see this tension today. And the surprising part of this is that Indonesia's Gen Zs says that they are satisfied with our democracy. This is our youth, we're saying. Even when the system is weakened, and researchers, it's just published a month ago, describe them as complacent Democrats. They say democracy is good, but they feel little urgency to defend it. And in the survey done last year, 2024, we have large portions of the youth, according to that survey, would choose strongman image, even if it's linked to possible authoritarian, without having reservation. So what I want to ask, and would like to invite you to think together, is a serious questions. What keeps democracy alive when new generations feel democracy is permanent? Democracy can be taken for granted. Even when the quality of our democracy were eroding. So allow me on these reflections to share my argument. There are three parts to this argument. One, the youth in Indonesia holds historic moral power, and it still does, since the old days. Today is the 27th and 28th of October. We are celebrating, commemorating the Sumpah Pemuda, the youth oath. Again, so the youth has hold historic moral power. But the second argument is that moral power alone is never enough. We also need integrity in how power is exercised, how power is being used. And the third argument that I'd like to share on this reflection is reinventing democracy means combining one, integrity, two, participations, three, shared prosperity across generations, not just by telling young people, please fix what we broke. We means the previous generations, the older generations. So those are three arguments that I'd like to share with you on these reflections. Now let me start with youth and power in Indonesia. And I would call it as a journey from moral force to governing force. In Indonesia, we grew up with the story of pemuda, young people, as the conscience of our nations. Let's remember a few milestones. 1928, it's the youth that get together and able to form an idea of one nation and able to agree upon one common language. Without that, all this diversity that we have will not be integrated into the feeling of oneness being Indonesia. And it gives us a milestone and a foundations how we strengthen the togetherness given the diversity that we have. And it was a genius breakthrough in 1928. And then in 98, which is about 70 years later, it's the student and the civil society activists, which is mostly young people as well, push to end an authoritarian regime in Indonesia. And they open up a democratic era in 98. 70 years later. Now in 2019, 2020, we have seen student activists, labor groups, environmental groups again filled our street to protest legal changes that was happening that weaken our democratic institutions, that weaken anti-corruption effort and protections toward laborers. Those are the period of 2019, 2020. again, who are out in the street, who are out there speaking up about change. It's the youth. So in our national narratives, I would say youth is not just about young people that own the future. Youth is an emergency brake in our country. Youth is an emergency brake. Whenever we are facing a crisis, it's the youth that step in and play a significant roles. But here is the uncomfortable fact of today, if I may say. The data has shown that the Gen Z Indonesians today, those are born after 1997, this is called Gen Z, it is reported that they have higher satisfactions with our democracy than the older generations. Many watchdogs say that our democracy is getting weaker, but for them, democracy is doing fine. And for the young people, according to the study, have also shown that the Gen Z tend to normalize strong, decisive leader style, support for strong leader who can bypass the usual political process to get things done. Especially, this is correlated with Gen Z's vote for winning the tickets in 2024. Many of these generations do not see past human rights abuses as disqualifying for them. Order and efficiency can look much more attractive than procedural checks or balances. This is the reality, but let's not panic looking at the reality. This doesn't mean that the young Indonesians are anti-democracy. In fact, survey shows that they still say democracy is the best form of government. What this simply means is idea of democracy, but they're more practical. So I think today our challenge is not to lecture the young people, but it is to connect with their demands. What are the demands of the young people? Economic fairness, climate justice, equality before the law, and with the hard and sometimes boring work of keeping democracy clean and accountable. So I call this as a moral imagination, linking hope to responsibility. So that's one part of my reflection here. The second is about the integrity. I'll put it that power is not only legitimate when it is, power is only legitimate when it is accountable. So integrity is key, and integrity is something that often absent. And integrity in democracy means power is exercised in a way that people can trust, people can verify, people can correct. When I speak about integrity, I don't mean to be a nice leader, but I mean build systems that make abuse of authority much harder and fairness is much easier. And we are facing tremendous challenge here in Indonesia. We know that the price of corruption is so high. It has distorted who gets contract, who gets protections, who gets justice. And I've said it many, many times throughout the years on our observations about this issue, that corruption has become so embedded that even entering politics can require compromise with corrupt actors. But we cannot accept that as normal. We have to break the supply of corruption early. I think in university, in the education sectors, we need to do that. When I served as university leadership, one of the breakthrough that we undertake was making anti-corruption courses as mandatory, because it is something needed to sort of reduce or cut the supply of potential corruptors in the future. So it is very important to bring back integrity into our politics here in Indonesia. And having integrity is a prevention, it's not a punishment, and we need to get it back. So we need also to start, in my reflections, viewing government from a different perspective, from ruler of the people into partner of the people. That government form collaboration with the people. And the state should not act like they own all the truth, but the state should invite, should engage, and make citizens, general publics, as co-creator to many, many problems that government is facing. If I may share a little bit of our experience in Jakarta, we approach challenges in our city along with the citizen of Jakarta, and we create collaboration. That everything that we're doing, we are doing it together with the civil society, with the resident directly, with expert, so forming a collaboration in solving many challenges in our city. So, what you said earlier, this requires transparency. To engage the public in the process, it requires meritocracy, and often we use the term for simpler word, good governance. And government that does this approach will send a clear message that it has integrity. When meritocracy is there, when transparency is there, good governance is there. Why this matters? Why collaboration, transparency, meritocracy matters for the youth? Why that is the case? Because the young people will not defend a system that they consider as hypocrites. They will not defend it. If meritocracy is absent, if integrity is absent, if collaboration is absent, then what's in it? That we have to defend it. Why should we care? So, if they see law being used to protect the powerful, the youth will quietly disengage. And the silence they create will give rooms for authoritarian styles to grow and to take over. And this is why it matters to reform that aspect. Now, let me talk about complacent Democrats. That refers to this Gen Z. The Gen Z says that democracy is good, but we don't feel the urgency about threat to democracy. What has happened in the past 7 years, I would say, is not a threat in their perspective. This complacency makes backsliding a lot easier because you can easily weaken institutions of democracy quietly, while most citizens, including the young people, were still feeling, I'm satisfied with democracy. So the deteriorations of the quality of our democracy can happen silently. So that's the dangers. But what's the hope? The hope is that the same generations who care less about institutions, they care more about fairness. They talk about wages, they talk about housing, they talk about climates, access to health, dignity at work. So at the same time, they talk about these issues. When Indonesian youth marched in 2019 against the weakening of anti-corruption bodies, and they stand up against laws that is seen as unjust to laborers, workers, and to environment, the youth have shown to us that they can still act as a moral alarm for the whole country. And this is not only in Indonesia, I think this is a phenomenon also in Asia. We have seen similar things happening across Asia, like the reform-minded youth parties in Thailand that won the popular vote on anti-corruption, on pro-reform agenda, and then met resistance from the military junta there. Pita just visited Jakarta 3 weeks ago, and we had a long conversation. We said similar issue here. And globally, we have seen young climate activists, labor organizers, digital rights group are forming cross-border alliances. They talk to each other, not just on the local governments, but on global phenomena where democracy eroding and soft authoritarianism are emerging. So we are also seeing two things happening. On the one hand, they care less about the institutions of democracy that is eroding, but on the other hand, the youth were caring about practical issues that matter to the populations. Now, the warning is to us meaning the older generation, not your generation perhaps. Some of you are Z generations. But for the older generations, it is tempting for my generation, all the older generations, to say, you know, looking at this threat to democracy, relax. The youth will step out and fix it. Okay? I think we need not to approach this with that kind of perspective. It is unfair to the youth and it is irresponsible. So the current problems that we are now facing in our country, Indonesia, money politics, expensive elections, you tell me, I've gone through this process, very expensive. Selective law enforcement, just my friend just passed through this process, very selective law enforcement. He was selected in that. These are all produced not by the youth. All these problems were produced by the older elites, including my generations. So we cannot outsource the work of repair to the youth. We cannot outsource this. So when we talk about the youth will save democracy, it has to end with a comma, not with a period. Yes, the youth will save democracy, comma. But the older leaders need to stop breaking democracy. Because it takes two to tango. It's not only this, it's the elderly, it's the elder generations that actually break democracy. So now let's look at the futures. Let's reinvent democracy from ritual into delivery. This is not slogans. What I'm going to say, it's not slogans. What I'm going to say is work plans. One, we need democracy to guarantee equal dignity, not just equal in the voting day. Not only equal rights on the voting days. Yes, Indonesia has become one country in one nation in 1928. We have become one republic in 1945. We have become one homeland in 1957, and then recognized by the world by UN clause in 1982 that our ocean, our sea, and our land are one homeland. That's oneness in three stages. We need the fourth stage, which is one prosperity. So one nation, done. One republic, done. One homeland, done. What's missing today is one shared prosperity, satu kemakmuran. So a just democracy, a quality democracy, must make people feel at least three things in their daily life. Safe to speak and to participate. 2, equal economic opportunity. 3, equal under the law. At least these three things must happen. So if ordinary citizens cannot feel those three things at the minimum, democracy is only a theater. Democracy becomes a kabuki, a performance. Second agenda, the democracy must be collaborative, not ceremonial. Public participation cannot just mean we have held consultations. We took photo, we took selfie, and then thank you everyone for coming for the consultations. We have to institutionalize partnership into co-creationship, that those in government are collaborators, and those as citizens, residents, as co-creator. So citizens help to design policy, monitor budgets, evaluate delivery, and this is beyond the traditional role that is often echoed. We in government will do everything. What you need to do, just two things: pay tax and vote in the election. You don't have to do the rest. No. We need you to pay more, to play a role more than that. And not only to criticize. This is beyond criticize, but co-creations. So this requires changing mindset of the state from egocentric to problem-centric, from chasing growth number into focusing on fairness and sustainability. I must add to this, we don't want to claim, but we try to do this in Jakarta. With collaboration. It is long process, sometimes painful. However, once we reach a collective agreement, it's like paving the solid foundations for building trust, and trust is key in democratic process. So that's the second agenda. The third, democracy must treat climate justice as part of social justice. Climate shocks today hitting fishing communities, farmers, coastal families, and floods in the northern coastal of Java, land subsidence, the changing fish pattern in eastern Indonesia. People already paying the price. And if the state says that we are democratic, but at the same time, we let these communities drown, that is not democracy. That is abandonment. And many of our communities, in various different areas, we're saying we are abandoned, we have been forgotten. So climate responsibility is not a side project, and it is now a test to whether the state treats all citizens as equal or not. The fourth agenda is democracy must rebuild integrity every day. What do I mean by this? That integrity must not be outsourced to anti-corruption agencies such as KPK, while the rest of the system quietly normalize the transactional politics. Integrity must be cultural, must be taught early, must be practiced in hiring, in budgeting, in licensing, in planning at the city level, at the provincial level, or at the national level, everywhere. So a government that runs on merit, not on favoritism, send a very visible signal to the populations that the house is trustworthy. And when citizens sees that, they defend democracy emotionally, not only intellectually. And if I may reflect on this, why integrity matters. When the Republic was founded, the founding fathers were coming from mostly privileged families that has the privilege to be educated with Western modern education. Most of them were educated in this very land. These are privileged individuals. They came back, fight to form a republic that is not only for the privileged, but a republic that provides equal opportunity for everyone. And these individuals, if I may say names, like Hatta, like Sahrir, Iwakusuma Sumantri, all of them were educated in the West, going back. In terms of number, they're very small, highly educated in a country where 95% of the populations were illiterate. What makes the entire population follow their idea? These are the combinations. Intellectual power combined with integrity translate into power that is unstoppable. They have the trust of the public. Why they have the trust? Because integrity is there. Integrity is there. None of us were seeing Hatta, Tahrir as individual pursuing micro self-interest. Yes, we all have self-interest. You know, only Gandhi perhaps doesn't have self-interest, or prophets. We all have a self-interest, but they were able to control that, and then with the integrity, they gain our trust. I've often shared this phenomenon with our colleague in the past few years, that names that I mentioned earlier, if I may ask you, what are their profession? Hatta, Tahrir, Soekarno, Nasir, what are their profession? Profesinya apa? Politician, yes. And families across the nation telling their kids, look at them, be like them. Right? Be like Hatta, be like Sahrir. Now, are you looking at politicians today and see, be like them? You're looking on TV and saying, be careful, don't be like them. Right? Why? The absence is not on the intellectuality. The absence is on what? That is why our democracy must rebuild integrity in everyday life. It's a must. So those are the four agenda. Now, for the older generations, what are the older generation must do? Quite a few are here, but you're not responsible for the decaying of democracy. You're observing from outside. I think for the older generation in Indonesia, let's stop saying the youth are apatis. Let's stop saying the youth were apathics. Because at the same time, we're often blocking their access to leadership. The older generations need to open political space. We need to lower the cost of running for office. We need to protect academic freedom. We need to protect free press, protect the rights to protest without intimidations. And that is our job of the older generations. So we also need to lead with integrity, so that integrity is in the Department of Political Science, not in the Department of Anthropology or the Department of History, because it is a story of the past. We need to make integrity a story of today. Because, you know, the young generations can smell hypocrisy much faster than any pollster can smell. They smell it much faster. And then what about the younger generations? For the younger generation, let's not leverage. Indonesia now, majority is young, and your expectations of fairness in itself is a political power. And do ask tough questions, such as, who benefit from this policy? Who pays the real cost? Whose voice is missing out in the room? Do ask tough questions when it comes to policy assessment. And remember that leaders' persona must go beyond cute, friendly, strong, but it has to go beyond that. Ask these questions. Does this leader protect rule of law? Or is she or he is going to bend the law? Does this leader widen participations? Or is he or she is going to narrow participations? So we have shared duty for the young people, for the youth, and for the older generations. So the agenda for change, the real change, is a collective job across sectors, across regions, and across generations. And it needs leadership that is capable, that has integrity, and able to work collaboratively, not only leadership that is centralistic and everything done in a unilateral way. Now, our responsibility today is to complete what previous generation has said. You know, I've said it to you earlier. One nation, we did it. One republic, we did it. One homeland, we did it. Those were done by the previous generations. Our homework today to the future is one shared prosperity that is just, that is equal and sustainable. So with that, let me end my opening remarks by saying that, you know, democracy is not just rules, but democracy is about trust. And we have seen that in a democracy, the pillar is trust. In an authoritarian system, the pillar is fear. When fear deteriorated, authoritarian regime collapsed. When trust is deteriorated, then democracy is in danger. So democracy is trust. And democracy is not only about protest or expressing our view, expressing our feeling, expressing our thinking, but it is about protection. And democracy is not just about freedom to speak, but it is also about freedom to live in a dignified life. So with that, I also think it is important to stay optimistic. And if I may, like myself and others, let's stop saying Indonesia is broken. I often said that narratives is something that is not acceptable. The country is rising actually with all its problems. You know, ordinary people in Indonesia waking up before dawn. They work with integrity. They carry this republic with everyday hard work life. But the job is that those who are in the leadership need to match the integrity and the work hard of the regular people in our society. And I've quoted a couple times, so I'll quote it here again, that Nelson Mandela once said, "It always seems impossible until it's done." That's not a poetry, that's actually an instruction. So let me end this by saying that yes, the young people were not the last defense of democracy, but the people with power are the last defense. Young people are often serve as the last alarm, and when they ring that alarm, leaders must listen, and leaders must correct the course with integrity, not with panic. So, if we are able to reinvent our democracy, not by replacing one generation with another, but by forcing power to serve the public with honesty, with fairness, and with courage, I think we can have our democracy work for achieving one shared prosperity for all Indonesia. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Anis, for this very inspiring talk. As far as now moving this stage, I think the key and the essence here is seeing democracy as a process of collaboration and co-creation. I like that very much, on the pathway towards the final unfinished promise of a shared prosperity, one prosperity towards dignity, dignified life for all.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you, Pak Anis, for this hopeful and positive talk, and the way of talking back to those who say Indonesia is broken. And as a political scientist, I've been studying elections and democracy in Indonesia for 15 years now, and written on many of the themes that you touched upon, on money politics, on democratic backsliding, the shrinking of civic space. So sharing many of the concerns that motivated your talk, I was very happy to hear, to have put all these topics on the agenda. So before we're going to open it up and talk, and let you all also ask questions, I'll have a few questions so we can touch upon some of the elements of your talk. One is the most recent expression of the concern of the youth with democracy in Indonesia, at the moment when they were not complacent Democrats, but in now 2 months ago, in August, they came out on the street and were, you might say, ringing the alarm, as you say, about democracy. It started out smallish, and then there was the killing of Kuliah, and the protest got a scale, I must say, that surprised me, the amount of cities that were touched by violence also. I'm curious to ask you, how do you interpret these protests and the aftermath? Is this was this students ringing the alarm and calling for strengthening democracy, or is this democracy in peril, and the fact that it seemed like nothing happened much afterwards, that the support for democracy, the expression of support for democracy declined because of these student protests?
Yeah, thank you, Professor Ward. I think in the August, I would rather call it as incident rather than a truly political move that is organized in a way. So, economic pressures that has been experienced by regular Indonesians across Indonesia, it has created a feeling of unhappiness, dissatisfaction toward government. And the new government was 10 months on duty by then. And I think by then, we did not see real change happening from the economic point of view. And then we are also witnessing the passing of law in the DPR that has minimum deliberations, minimum public participations, including the passing of the law on the military roles in civil servants. Now, that has created dissatisfaction, discontent among student leaders. Now, when they marched and protested in August, it was also doubled by the DPR that has not been functioning in our house. For almost a year, we have not seen significant debate in the house. The house has been quiet. So you have economic challenges, you have law that is passed with minimum deliberation, and then you have the house that act in ways that undermine and disrespectful to the public. So it creates an outrage. However, it was not something that we can call it as a movement, like in a way, in which you have a clear agenda that has been discussed for years and years before '98. This was more like dissatisfaction toward the situation. That's why when Afan was killed that evening, it sparked the anger everywhere. Now, still unclear until today who provoked into violence and riots. Okay? But in our experience, that's nothing new. It happens all the time. When I was a student activist in the 90s, the way the military stopped a demonstrations is then, not today, then, is by creating chaos, creating riots, because we, the students, will then retreat. Because we don't want to be part of those who produce riots. We retreat because there is a violence. So the way I saw it, when there was violence, this is a very effective way to stop the demonstration. And immediately, those who come out with real agenda retreated. And then that's what happened. However, having said that, they really have retreated. I think the issue has not been solved. The economic condition is not improving. The DPR has not made any significant progress. And then there is a demand called 17.8. Yeah, 17. Almost very minimum, almost none is seriously addressed. So the problem is still there. And I think it's a matter of time, it will re-emerge again.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think this movement brought the agenda, or these 7 points formulated it, but it has not, these points have not really been addressed. And one reason perhaps why it has not been addressed is that this feeling of discontent could not find a connection with the DPR, as you mentioned, in the parliament, that has been, and we are bringing another political science terms, you might say cartelized, that a large majority of parties and parliamentarians have become associated with government, and in that way not taking its role as opposition. And I would want, if these are student protests with an agenda, you would want some opposition forces in parliament take on this agenda and express it, and then be the spokesperson of that agenda inside parliament. So this is a recurring theme of Indonesian democracy also, that people say, why is opposition, if it's there, it's outside parliament, and how come parliament becomes cartelized, you say, everybody jumps onto the government and wants to join, and say, even if you would have won elections, perhaps all these parties would suddenly be in your coalition. It would be King plus plus, and then another coalition. So the question would be, why has it been difficult to have a real opposition within Parliament, and what could be done about that?
In the past we had situations where newly elected president were facing strong oppositions in the House. In 2004, when SBY was elected, he was a minority in the House, and he had to face strong opposition. And then over time, he was able to secure support in the House. When Jokowi won the 2014 election, also he was a minority. And Gerindra, Golkar was on the other side, and they control the House. This time, the situation has shifted. And I think part of the factor that contributed to that is because the previous president, Pak Jokowi, was very much involved in the election process. So continue, I'm witnessing that. The intervention was clear. So continuity was the message. Therefore, it was a form of government. It was a continuity. So those who supported President Jokowi, two parties out, Nasdem and PKB, supported Anies. Okay? But and then after the election over, they're back to the column. Okay? So this is rather different. Despite the fact that Ibu Megawati was in power as president, she did not intervene in election. Free and fair election. And we must pay appreciation and tribute to Ibu Megawati for not intervening election. And it was free and fair elections. 2014, President SBY was in office. He ran the election. He did not intervene in the election and let whoever wins. So when election is over, then you have a new balance. And often the balance is, on the executive side, you control the agency, but on the legislative side, the opposition also have strong voice. But this time is absence. And I think the absency has something to do with the nominations of candidates and role of the previous administrations in the elections, and the impact is what we pay now. Now, it is unique that you have a house where 80% of the members belong to the coalitions of the president. There is one party who's outside, but not clearly opposition either. And there you go, we have the civil society that take over that role. So this is troubling, I would say. But from our perspective, I don't see this as the end of the story. Sometimes in our democratic consolidations, we make 2 steps forward, 1 step backward, 3 steps forward, 2 steps backward, and that's sort of the process. So I think we are now, 1 step backward. However, civil society, labor unions, student activists, some portions of the media, we're still actively pushing for more transparency, pushing more rooms for criticism that should have been taken by the House, but since the House is silent, so they substitute that role.
So a nice moment in your talk was when you talked about how people look up to older generations of politicians and no longer to the current generation. And so it made me think of studies of politics right now, and the current theme in that, which I think is an explanation for that difference, and that is the role of money.
Yes.
That Shahrir and Hatta, they could be elected on their persona and their ideas, and they didn't need to make deals or correct big budgets or do elections. And if I would summarize a lot of my research my book, Democracy for Sale, in one sentence, it would be that it's very difficult to be the kind of integrity politician that you spoke about and win elections. That to win elections, currently, you need to be willing to hand out money. It's sad, but if I put it honestly on the table, that particularly for local elections, that's what it is. And that's why my question would be about reform.
Now there is talk about an undang-undang pemilu and a form of elections. But when I'm following these discussions, in my view, it's too much about let's not have elections, what a hassle, but rather about how could we keep democratic accountability, can we keep reward and punish bad politicians, but reduce the cost of elections, and in particularly reduce this role of vote buying and handing out money. What could be done to get some more structural reforms of democracy and elections on the table so that we keep the good things of democracy and reduce at least the bad things?
Yeah, it will take times, Professor Bart. It will take times. But I'm more optimistic actually on this. We have seen not yet pattern, but cases, not yet pattern, but cases where local champions with integrity, with good records, won local elections and able to defeat candidates that buy votes. The cases were there, but not yet pattern. So those are there. And then our own experience. When we had our campaign during the 2024 elections, we didn't hand out money. We don't have money. There's no money at all volunteer. And you know, we got 25%, 40 millions. These are voters who are not paid, who dare to face threat and still vote. Myself and Ganjar. Ganjar also gets 16%. So there's 42% who are voting not based on transaction. A study done by Professor Fitz. Let me check the name. I'll get back. I haven't found the full name. Professor Fitz at the Faculty of Economics at the University of Indonesia. He has been doing study on irregularities of votes, and he was able to identify blocks of voters that vote based on money politics, and those who are not, were voting without money politics there. So yes, there is that issue, but also we have large portion as well, not majority yet. And it is our responsibility now to continue the campaign, the educations of not selling our vote. And we should pursue that process. On the other hand, we need to fix our underground economy, Professor Bart. Because one of the challenge of fixing money in politics, transactional politics, is by tackling the root cause. What is the root cause? Underground economy. Because money that is being used to buy vote is not coming from the upper ground economy, it's from underground economy. What underground economy? One, economy, illegal activities. Judi online, drugs, mining that is underreported. That's second issue. That's second issue. Illegal mining, that's one. And then two, unreported revenues. You may have a mining open pit mining, for example, and you are extracting, let's say, coal, 1 million tons, but you only reported 600,000. So unreported is in the second issue. The third issue, which is little number, is unregistered activity and informal sectors, but those are small. The first two is big. And these are source of money politics. So we need to fix this. And what is that? That means transparency, better taxing system, so that we can capture. And unfortunately, Professor Ward, Indonesia now, I think, ranked second or third in the world for its portions of underground economy. For 25% of our economy is underground economy. And 25% out of 20,000 trillion rupiah, that's a big number. And if we address that, it will be much all of this. Because financing this need money that is not in our banking system. Otherwise, it will be easier to track. So I'm optimistic, but it'll take time. I don't think it can be fixed immediately, but I think we have now come to realizations that also in many communities that you may buy vote, or you may sell your vote, and this is what happened to the policy in your area. Especially the local elections have been a meaningful education for the public on the result of vote buying and policies in that community.
Thank you for that. I have many more things to ask, but let's go to the audience.
Yeah, I was just asking Bart if you want to briefly respond to that before we, from your own expertise.
I think
of
a
course.
very brief one is the governance issue that you raised, which is about this underground economy, that indeed interested economic actors make donations to politicians because then the politicians will pressurize bureaucrats to allow certain things to happen. And that's where actually Indonesia was making progress. They had adopted an undang-undang ASN, a civil service law that would make civil servants more independent of political pressures and more capable of implementing policies as written rather than these kind of like naughty playing with the regulation. But this has been reversed, and I was just visiting last year the Commissie ASN, which has been closed down, and much of the efforts to make civil servants independent have been reversed because politicians like, of course, to tell bureaucrats what to do because they can do the things that Anis mentioned. So I would, as part of this integrity effort, I think fighting for the reformasi reforms and putting that back on would be an important challenge.
Absolutely. Thank you both so much for this very interesting addition to the lecture. I'm sure there are many questions in the audience. Let's start with 2 or 3. So let's start with the younger people first. Yeah. Are you young? Yeah.
No. Perhaps you can tell your age and then raise your hand.
The youngest goes first, yeah. No, there, I'll just, yeah? No, I think yeah.
Yes, yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, Pak Anis. My name is Jefferson. I'm a new PhD student in Leiden University. And actually, I want to highlight about the intellectual power. As you mentioned, you gave an illustration how the intellectual aspect and also integrity combine to become an ultimate power. And I don't see today that the intellectual aspect has its power in our country, especially when I see people with person with logical fallacy, or maybe someone who has his or her graduate certificate question to lead our country. And the thing that I want to ask you, Pak Anis, how to reinvent the power of intellectual power to gain its own power. So because in my view, today's intellectual aspect has no power at all.
Well, like Pak Anis said, it used to be Shahrir and Hatta who were really intellectuals, of course, who were the heroes of the nation. Pak Anis, do you want to respond?
If I may suggest, can we take a few and then
Sure,
respond?
yeah, that's better. Yeah, there in the
Professor
back.
Ward. Professor
Yeah,
Ward,
yeah, yeah.
I'll give you my card.
Yes, I know. But I'm
Contact number.
first doing a few younger ones. Yeah.
If you text me, I'll save it.
Hi, afternoon, Banis. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm Alif, master graduate from Erasmus University Rotterdam, majoring in governance and different policy. Yes, but my question is that we are seeing now many policies set by the parliament and also the government. And in our view, because many incompetent people sitting in the government and MPs and parliament, because on the election day, they hold greater capital. They have more money. So the more money they have, the more chance for them to win. What I'm trying to say is that we cannot touch the elites, but we can do something to the people, to the commoners. So that it leads to my question for you. How do you see the voters on the election day? And are they an object for us to educate so they can know better about the candidates which one is better and how robust, understanding on the politics. Yeah, thank you so much.
I'll take one from this side. There's one. And on the back, I see a very young face, maybe? I don't know. Yeah.
This is the microphone.
Ya bahasa Indonesia aja. Pak Anies, saya mau kasih tahu Bapak bicara bahasa dari negara tuh yang menghancurkan negara-negara lain dan juga membuat peta dunia. Dan sampai sekarang dunia itu nggak benar karena mereka. Kenapa saya katakan ini? Karena pengaruh mereka itu besar sekali. Bapak bilang tadi kita punya income itu dari dari di bawah tanah, ya. Itu dipakai untuk mereka di sini. Untuk dipakai mereka di sini. Ya, jadi kita punya orang-orang itu nggak dapat apa-apa. Dan juga mereka menyalahgunakan kita punya pemerintah. Yang seperti Bapak bilang tadi, korupsi. Ya. Sekarang saya mau tanya, Bapak tahu nggak? Bapak di negara ini, itu duit yang mereka dapat sampai sekarang, itu duit Indonesia, Pak. 350 tahun mereka merampas dan segala macam. 4,5 miliar gulden kita harus ganti rugi.
Thank you.
Bapak sadar nggak bahwa tanah air ini menyalahgunakan kita punya negara?
Yeah, so this, just to recap for the non-Indonesian speakers, this is about the colonial legacy, of course, of the Netherlands. And there has been research, there has been a talk recently also at the university which shows how many billions of euros actually in the Netherlands is still making from that legacy. Yes, one final question before we ask for a few responses.
Hello, Banis. My name is Danis. I came along with my twin brother. Sorry, can you hear me?
Your name?
Danis, D-A-N-I-S. Yeah. So I came here along with my twin brother. We both are studying in the University of Amsterdam. And actually, this is not our first time meeting. Because back in 2023, we met during the 17th birthdays of Anto Purwata's daughter. If you still remember.
Can you speak slower
I'm sorry.
so I can?
Okay, yeah. So this is actually not our first time meeting, because back in 2023, we met each other during the 17th birthdays of Anto Purwata's daughter, if you still remember the name. Because at that time, a lot of my friends were also taking picture with you as well. And ever since then, we've been following your political career very closely. And even though at that time, like you weren't on my options to vote in the presidential elections, but after that has changed until we saw your political debate, your presidential debate. And at that time, I still remember there's one question regarding Jakarta's pollution, and in which you word your answer with the phrase, angin tidak punya KTP. And even though that might seem like a very simple parable for me to interpret, but afterwards I saw in a lot of social media that there's a lot of people who actually misinterpreted it or actually make jokes of it. And that left me with a question. Okay, maybe some part of them, they might be like biased towards interpreting that question. Or second, or maybe they're just a buzzer. Or third, maybe they just have a different level of education compared to those who can actually interpret it. And my question is actually, do you think democracy should only be reserved to those nations with equal access to educations? Should I repeat my question?
So the question is whether social media should be
Oh,
reserved?
no, sorry. As democracy should only be reserved for those nations with equal access to educations.
Do those nations exist?
Yeah. Is it audible?
I don't understand
The
the
question
question.
was
Oh,
whether
sorry.
democracy should be reserved for nations with equal access to education.
Since when we're talking about democracy here, every people have.
Yes,
Okay,
yes, yes.
just like 10 more seconds. Sorry. So if we're talking about democracy here, like every people have equal power of voting, right? For example, you, PhD title holder, and for example, with my grandparents who don't even have a ijazah SMP, but they have the same equal power of voting. Like, do you think it should be right or no? Since
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you. So because we have very little time, so Amis, do you want to take more questions and then just make a general kind of response?
Yeah, let me just respond first. So, number one is Jefferson says about bringing back intellectual power. So I would also say that we need to have more rooms for technocracy in the policy making of Indonesia. And of course, political aspect is important, but democracy is important. And for political parties, I think we need to bring ideology to the front. I think in the past 2-3 decades, we have not seen clear ideology from political parties. What ideology they stand for, what are missions, so that today we cannot distinguish clearly between political party. These have become simply vehicle to get into authority, not so much political party with ideas. And if you look back in the past, we have contending political parties that clearly have different ideological lines. And when you have different ideological lines, you provide sort of stimulations for intellectual thinking to emerge. Because then you have to argue, let's say, when the Socialistic Party was there, they argue why this has to go through this approach. And when the nationalists were talking about using nationalism, then they have to translate that into thinking. So having ideology stated clearly will stimulate rooms for debate, for conversation, and that's where rooms for intellectual can grow. Without that, it will be very tough. So on government side, provide rooms for technocracy. On the political party side, give clear ideology so that you have debate clearly on issues. Okay, that's one. Alif, in our DPR, large number of our members, the member of the House, were involved in vote buying. And I think large portion of that contributed to open list system, where competing within the party. If we go back, I think the tendency now to go back to closed list, that the list of the candidates have been decided and you vote for the party, not for the individuals. I think it will then give less incentive for candidates to buy votes, because what is happening, candidates for the House, they're competing within the party and competing with other political parties. And that is where the challenge is. And vote buying is not only happening between the voters with the candidates, but also the candidates with the election committee. And the election committee is well known at the national. We didn't know their track records. And that is where vote buyings were happening. So if we go back to the closed list, we may reduce that issues. Okay, and then I understand your issue. I think I was told that there was a discussion also happening here. I think would like to get the record so I can learn as well. Thank you, Pak. And then on the last one, Dennis, on democracy only for those with education. If there is not enough education, let's not get involved in democracy. Well, preparedness to participate in a democratic process is not simply a function of the degree that you have. It's not only a function of the level of education you have. If I may say, Indonesians were educated on elections during the New Order period. We were trained by the New Order to run elections 6 times. We knew the result before the election took place. Okay? But you know, there is no less than 900,000 polling stations. And the election must be done in 5 hours, simultaneously, across the country. Very complex system. That was impressive. Look at new democracy in the Middle East after the Arab Spring. It collapsed. Look at Eastern Europe. Look at Latin America. The population was not prepared for an electoral process. So when authoritarian regimes fall down, the population held first election and chaotic. Look, Indonesia held first elections in 1999, only a few months of preparations, but the entire population, the organizers were prepared, and the organizers were civil society. The voters were prepared because we were educated to go to the polling station and vote. And after you vote, you go back home and watch for TV, right? And you'll see the result. This was an education process. It has nothing to do with degree, has nothing to do with level of education. But this is called a political education. It was done under the New Order. The credit goes to them. Now, we were trained to do the electoral process, but we were not trained to conduct quality voting. That is not yet. Okay? So when we have free elections, now we need to go beyond that by being selective, being rational, vote according to your preference. That is something that we need to educate. So, you know, educated the entire population with 6 times elections. This will also need a few times of elections to get us produce quality votes, with quality result of elections. But do not underestimate the ability of Indonesians in undergoing this electoral process. Yes, we need to learn more, we need to produce better results, but let's remember, the process of growing for a human being is very different than the process of growing in a society. Let's not use our human age for a societal growth. It will take time, but stay the course. Be optimistic. We'll get there.
How much time do we still have? Maybe I should ask the organizers. Yeah, 1 moment. I need to know first how much time they have because it's already almost 5. Oh, the same. Okay, let's take a few more questions. But first, and then you're very eager, and then you've also been waiting. Yes.
Hello. I'm Almira. I'm the head of PPI Amsterdam, and also I'm a UVA student and UE student. So my question is, as you mentioned, there might be vote buying, etc., and we might predict who will win first in the election process even before it already announced. So we're as a Gen Z, as a future leaders, of course. So, in your opinion, what are the qualities or inner qualities, capacities, or mindset that Gen Z should have to develop and move from the passive acceptance to active renewal of democracy? Thank you.
So the microphone is that big?
Thank you. Selamat sore, terima kasih atas kesempatan yang diberikan kepada saya. Perkenalkan, nama saya Abdul Aziz. Saya koresponden tetap dari surat kabar online yang berbasis di Surabaya, kempalan.com, yang saya reside atau tinggal di Amsterdam ini untuk meliput seluruh wilayah Eropa dan Schengen. Saya cukup mengikuti perkembangan Bapak Anies sejak kuliah di MU, di Medan University, dan pada waktu itu di Amerika, saya juga kuliah di Georgetown University dan George Washington University, saya ambil MBA, kemudian Pak Anies melanjutkan ke PhD. Kemudian dari Amerika, saya berkarir keliling ke Dubai, ke Singapura, dan sebagainya, 30 negara. Oke, pertanyaan saya Pak Anies, apa yang disampaikan oleh Pak Anies ini sangat bagus sekali. Saya sebagai aktivis politik di Indonesia dan hingga saat ini saya juga member Forum Diaspora Indonesia dan juga ex-aktivis jaringan relawan yang mendukung Bapak Anies pada pemilu 2024 yang lalu. Reflection on power and integrity from Indonesia, in my perspective, it's gonna be complete or it's gonna be perfect if Mr. Anies could propose, hopefully Mr. Anies Baswedan will be our next president, inshallah. Our main problem in Indonesia, frankly speaking, is moral. The corruption is terrible, and all the business activities and politicians are very bad. So the main problem coming from the religious sectors, people doesn't scared of God.
Maaf, because we have a lot of questions still. Can you
Yeah,
come to the question,
this is
please?
my question. So is it possible if maybe we can fix about the religious, about the ethical, and about the morality in Indonesia in order to become Indonesian better in the future? Thank you.
I already,
Halo, okay. Halo, Mas Anies. My name is Shawai. I'm a university student in UVA, undergraduate. I know I look old, but I'm still 20. So I have a short question. Mr. Anies, Darren Ajamolu in Why Nations Fail says nations don't fail because the people are lazy.
Hold on.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to repeat it. Darren Ajamolu in Why Nations Fail says nations don't fail because the people are lazy, but because institutions become extractive, controlled by elites for their own benefits. In Indonesian, we call it Korea lah. And looking at Indonesia today, with money politics, selective law enforcement, and local capture, it feels like the doors of democracy have been locked from inside. Even when people protest, their voices cannot be heard from inside the DPR building. So my question is, Mr. Anies, how can young people push for truly inclusive institutions without falling into populism or apathy? And as international students, how can we be the plutonium in this atomic bomb, helping reopen those doors of democracy for the people? That's it. Thank you.
plutonium and the atomic bomb. I think that one went viral a few weeks ago. How many questions did we have? 3? One more. What was your name again? Shawai. Sorry, the lady in the pink. Just the lady in the pink. Your skirt is very topical.
Oh Oh ya, nanti aja jangan nyalain.
Hello, Pak Anies. Thank you so much for your opportunity. My name is Deborah, and I'm a master's student in political science in Leiden University. Thank you so much for your very interesting insight on democracy, which is a very important issue. And in here, my question is with the very cartelized political parties in Indonesia, I think one of the solution that we can have is to have challenger parties. Just straightforward, how does your take on this? Would you do you ever think to build a political parties that could manage to challenge the established parties that we are have right now? Because I think we cannot rely with the current political parties in Indonesia, as Bapak already said, there are no ideology, there are no program, and only benefits for the elite. So, do you think to manage and build your own political parties in the future, because we only have 4 years left to the next upcoming election, and yeah, you already need to do education politics up since right now. Thank you so much.
I think a lot of people in the audience are waiting for some revelation here. Not sure if we're going to get it. This is supposed to be an academic event, actually. Do you want to respond first to these questions?
So, if I may respond, in general, with democracy and the youth, you've been saying, nation, why nation fail? And then you're talking about what should we do as young people. I think I said it earlier, that it's important for the young generations to ask tough questions. Who gets what in every policy that is made? Where is our part in the policy that government is making? And I think that are part of the roles that you can do. And be active, be truly active. For example, if you question some policies, don't let it go unchallenged. If government decided to build a fast-track train between Jakarta and Bandung, and it is financed by taxpayers across Indonesia, but the benefit only being felt by the people of these two cities, would people like you're from Sumatera Utara, from Medan, would you not be asking questions? Why should our tax money go there? Why should we do it? So I think it is very important for you to speak up. And if you let it go unchallenged, they will continue doing this. So speak up and speak up. And once you're done, go back to Indonesia. Go back to Indonesia. And his grandfather was the governor of North Sumatra. So continue your grandfather's role, being part in politics. Be there and active, okay? So
without money.
Yeah. And then questions on Abdulaziz, you know, what next? And also you're also talking about what next? Tunggu aba-aba. How do I say tunggu aba-aba? Well, yeah, of course, that is one of the things that we've been contemplating. We've been contemplating, we have not come to conclusion yet, but I agree with you. There is a need for new and fresh. However, it has to be done differently. I think we pick up a lot of lessons from our campaign in the past, that volunteerism was the keyword. Everything done through volunteerism. And we were not satisfied with the result. Not because of our achievement, but we are not satisfied because the way the election was run. The election was run with a lot of state intervention through law enforcement, as well as through government programs of subsidy here and there. I think it has colored the process and it has shifted the result. We challenge that to the court, but from our perspective, we also learn that there are champions in our society who are willing to be part of this process, working with volunteerism, working, spending their resources for a mission, for a purpose. And I think we have seen those individuals. Now they're part of our network. So we will come to gathering and we'll decide where to go. And if it is a go, I think you should come back and involve. So I think I've addressed all of that.
Yes.
I was putting this on
Yes,
TV
I was
because
wondering about this.
this has nothing to do with our discussion, Pak. But this has anything to do with climate, with environmental problems. But I think I'd like you to see these pictures to get you idea how our city in Jakarta is having pollution problem, air quality problem.
This is air quality.
Air quality problem. Before you start, this is a real picture, satellite pictures of air quality in Java and Sumatra by hour. So every hour, the satellite is taking pictures, and they collected the data over months, years, to get the profile of air quality in Java. The darker is the dirtier. The lighter means clean. So you can start now. You will see Jakarta often become the most polluted city, not because of within Jakarta, but because of the chimney in the coal power plant generated by coal. So if you see that, it is very scary. When the winds blows to Jakarta, Jakarta will be very polluted. But when the winds goes to Sumatra, it's Sumatra that is polluted. The problem is why when Jakarta gets the dirty air, the alarm goes on because we put air quality detector. In other area, they don't have the detector. Because they don't have a detector, so it says as if it's clean, but it is not. So you see that it's very scary picture. And this is by hour. This is why I said the air doesn't have, the wind doesn't have KTP. Because it keep moving. Depending on the wind blows, then the air quality of Jakarta, and not only Jakarta, of entire city. So we need to fix this.
Thank you. Shall we take a few more questions? Yeah, and yes, very enthusiastic. Ini Mbak ini, terus yeah, and one in the back again.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Nora, and I'm
Nora.
Yeah, and I'm studying at the UVA. My question is basically sourced from everyone else's question here. It's just, so what does the role of social media play into some sort of the intellectual power we need to cultivate? And does it deteriorate, or does it actually, like grow more discussions among us, the youth? Yeah, that's.
Thank you. So the role of social media. And there was one more, I think, sorry, there in the back, you can.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, Pak Anies. My name is Angga. I am IT programmer at ING Bank here in Amsterdam. I have a question. I got an impression about your talk that the old generation actually, destroys, damages the democracy, and then the youth are like the quote unquote like the victim of it. But actually, if I see the facts nowadays, I'm almost in my 30s, and then some of my friends actually sort of like climb up the ladder to the politics as well. And then I kind of see that they are not that how do I say, like that vanilla.
up issues that's overlooked. So we have seen policy communications, policy executions that is not as planned, and social media was instrumental in bringing that up into attention. And wrongdoings, we have seen that. The challenge in our social media today is how can, and also on top of that, social media has been instrumental in fighting against fear. The challenge today, I think, how social media can create and strengthen trust, and that is still absent. What we have is we are no longer fearful to talk about wrongdoing, but how can social media create trust? And I think that is still a big homework for us. So in Indonesia, same thing. We have seen no viral, no justice slogans. That when you see injustice and you bring it up through social media, and then attention is given. And unfortunately, the mainstream media is now shopping issues in the social media instead of in the real observations in day-to-day life. So also shopping for news in the social media. So social media has become a marketplace, a free marketplace for a lot of issues to be raised. So on that aspect, it is good for democracy. But on the other hand, it is also in the social media where we have seen post-truth is happening, where many things many informations were created in ways that doesn't reflect reality. Hoax is going through all the time. That's why it is important for those who are active in social media, critical thinking. Because critical thinking is our skill against that. So that's one. Now, Angga, you raised a very interesting point that we have youth activists actively campaigning for democracy, and then they join a political party, and then they practice what they stand against.
Become pragmatic.
Very pragmatic. Yeah, and perhaps go further. Being pragmatic is one thing, but being opportunistic is another thing. I think it can go from idealistic into pragmatic and opportunistic. I think some have gone through that. And but we are also seeing those who stay the course. And what differentiates them? In my observation, those who continue to engage with communities of critics, community in the civil society, continue to engage, they stay the course. And that's why often our message to anyone, including myself, when I joined government in office, one of the things that has to continue being open is engagement with the civil society. Because that will help us when you enter government to stay the course. Because otherwise, you can easily trap into the culture of pragmatism and further opportunism. So, but that doesn't mean that we need to stop fighting for democracy for the youth. Just because some have defeated, I think it's our moral obligations to continue supplying new generations to help improving our system. Pak Mato, if I may answer your question in Bahasa Indonesia, so hopefully easier to understand too. begitu bertugas di Jakarta, saya bertugas di Jakarta, saat pemilu kita tidak bisa mengatur siapa mendukung dan siapa tidak mendukung. Saat pemilu kita bisa dukung siapa saja. Nilailah ketika bertugas. Apakah saat bertugas menjalankan konstitusi, menjalankan prinsip demokrasi, menjalankan prinsip kesetaraan selama bertugas. Disitulah dinilai. Karena itu saya sering sampaikan, ketika selesai pilkada 2017, pilkadanya sangat divisive. Sesudah itu saya hanya berdoa pada Tuhan, berikan umur panjang sehingga saya bisa menyelesaikan 5 tahun. Supaya apa? 5 tahun itu direkam jejak, di mana bisa dinilai bukan oleh hoax, bukan oleh mesin pembuat kebohongan di sosial media, tapi oleh rekam jejak. Apakah seluruh warga di Jakarta mendapatkan kesetaraan di dalam pelayanan, di dalam perlindungan, di dalam kebebasan, di dalam merayakan kebinekaan dan merayakan persatuan selama 5 tahun. Dan saya bersyukur selama itu rekam jejaknya melindungi semua. Bahkan tema-tema sensitif yang tidak bisa diselesaikan. Apa itu mas sensitif? Izin rumah ibadah. Tidak bisa diselesaikan. Justru pada periode itulah banyak yang terselesaikan. Jadi, saya ingin sampaikan, dalam pemilu kita tidak bisa mengontrol siapa mendukung, siapa tidak. Tapi nilailah ketika mulai bertugas. Pada saat itulah seseorang akan dilihat apakah dia bekerja mengikuti konstitusi atau dia bekerja mengikuti siapa yang memilih ketika pemilu berlangsung. Begitu jawabannya. Faris, you raise a very interesting point. That is appeal of authoritarianism. I've often responded to these questions, this question in Indonesia, because some of our bureaucrats, some of people in authority in Indonesia often echoing a message that maybe we don't need democracy. Maybe we need an authoritarian regime. And referring to China as an example. So my response is, why not referring to North Korea? That's also an authoritarian regime. Why not referring to Myanmar? That's also an authoritarian regime. So why should we be, cherry picking when showing an example? I think why China excel, not simply because of authoritarianism, because there is meritocracy there. There is meritocracy allows those with excellence to actually play roles. And without that, an authoritarian regime will not function. Same thing, democracy without meritocracy will also fail to function. And that's also what we're experiencing. So I think on that, we need to go a little bit further. Not simply it is about authoritarianism, but it is about what's in it that makes a country like China excel. And one of them is meritocracy. And that's what we need. There's an absence of meritocracy in Indonesia today, in the public sector, and sometimes also in the private sector. Organizations that values meritocracy in the private sector, they have proven to be sustainable over time. If I may names, Astra Group, give you example. Meritocracy is truly there. Good governance is truly there. That kind of organizations continue to grow over time. They're not operating based on licensing from government, based on meritocratic value. And this kind of organizations now is being copied to others. But we are not seeing similar things in our public service or public or government. I am grateful to see that Ministry of Foreign Affairs have been practicing selection in a meritocratic way for new entrants of diplomats. We have seen sons, daughters of the first echelon, even former ministers, were rejected to become diplomats. And for that, that is a good news. Not because he or she is rejected, but the fact that your son or daughter of somebody and not easily get accepted. And that's what we need. So we need more of that in our system, meritocracy. Yes, I agree. There is a danger of new feudalisms in our political party. Why? In the past, we have seen turnover of leadership in the political parties. Nowadays, we have not seen that turnover as it should be. And then in 2015, the Constitutional Court turned over our law on preventing brothers, sisters, and direct families to run after someone in that family is in office. So if I'm a governor, after I finish 2 terms, my brothers, my wife, or my in-law is not allowed to run again. That law was overturned in 2015. And that creates situations where after I do my 2nd term, my wife becomes the 3rd term. And then after my wife do the 2nd term, my son is the 5th term. And that law was there. In 2015, it was revised. It was unfortunate. And unfortunately, the president at that time decided not to challenge that. He could have challenged it, brought it to the DPR and overturned that. Because that is key to prevent our democracy from becoming feudalistic. I think what's unique about Indonesia compared to our neighbors, when our founding fathers established this republic, is equality. That you don't have to be someone to be a governor. You don't have to be children of a privileged family to be a bupati or mayor. And the structure was created equally. Equality was there. And I think there is that deterioration on that principles. Hopefully, all of us who care about that will continue to fight for bringing back equality and meritocracy into our system. Thank you.
Because the initiatives are there and the cases are there. Thank you. So before we close off, I want to ask Bart if you have some final comments or reflections based on the Q&A also and Pami's responses.
Well, I think one of the nice things of interaction like this is also to see you challenge and express your norms and values that you bring in politics. And I hope that if you do take up some of the suggestions we had, that you will indeed not go to the road of the pragmatism and beyond, but that you keep up also some of the values and norms that you expressed here about integrity and meritocracy. And I think that's what Indonesia needs, and that is reinventing democracy, if we can really realize that. But it's, as you say, it's a step-by-step struggle into the future.
Yeah, and also if I may share some of the reflection on that, it is way more difficult to work together among those with good intention. Orang baik lebih sulit bekerja sama. Why? Because orang baik demand to agree 100% each other. Okay? You and I have to agree 100% in order to maintain our togetherness. I may disagree with you 5%, and I may stay away from you.
So they become
Exactly.
more difficult.
Exactly. The orang tidak baik, they only have to agree 20%, and they still work together. Okay? And that is the issue. You may see differences, maybe the differences is small, but then immediately you break out. Immediately, I'm no longer with you. Done. Why? Because of 5% differences. And that is my reflections on this end of war. It is so difficult for good people to continue working together because we often demand that we have to be the same 100%. And we have to agree on all issues. If there is an issue that we disagree, immediately say, okay, I'm done with you. That is my reflection on this journey. I think it's very important to stay the course. Otherwise, we depart in a journey with 1,000 people, good intentioned individuals. After 2-3 years, we end up only with 300. Why? Because of disagreement on micro issue, and then people stay away. So in my reflection, it's very important for us to have a clear mission and then able to accept the fact that there is no way we will always agree on everything.
That is also not the essence of democracy, right? Exactly. To be completely 100% agreement. But in order to be able to build democracy collaboratively, as a co-creation, we need to accept, small differences, as long as the principles are similar, let's say, for democracy. I think, Pak Anies, you wanted to say something about Aksi Bersama also, or?
Yeah, if I may. We formed an organization called Aksi Bersama, and that we're working on building bridges in the remote areas of Indonesia. So we are doing this work